Welcome back to our study of progressivism. This is going to be a study of Chapter 9, Section 3, Roosevelt and his presidency. Roosevelt's policies as president, his first elected term as president, become known as the square deal from one of his speeches where he is saying that everyone in the United States deserves to have a square deal. Now, Roosevelt's policies are driven by public demand. Roosevelt was outspoken against muckrakers. He said all they did was stir up trouble, stir up dirt, which is essentially their job. It's what they were set out to do. But a lot of Roosevelt's changes that he puts into place in his square deal is a result of muckraking journalism. One example of that is the journalist Upton Sinclair, who wrote the book The Jungle. And in our textbook, there's a good quote from the book The Jungle. We will look at this in detail in class as well. But The Jungle essentially was written by Upton Sinclair to expose how badly the immigrants were being treated in the meatpacking industry in Chicago. But what turned out to happen was the creation of the Food and Drug Administration and the Meat Inspection Act. Sinclair wanted people to see how badly the workers were being treated, but what the United States and what the president actually saw was how bad our meat and our food coming to the American people was. So not exactly what Sinclair had hoped for, but still change did take place. Roosevelt's given credit for creating what's known as the modern presidency. This first line sums up progressivism even today. Again, the word progressivism is being thrown around a lot in the news today about how government is influencing daily lives of everyday citizens. It says Roosevelt believed it to be the president's responsibility to take care of the national welfare. And in a sense, that's true. The government's job is to take care of the welfare of the people, but not run the lives of the people. Roosevelt takes what used to be a laissez-faire government and completely flips it around to now government-heavy regulation and breaking up trusts and monopolies and basically telling people how to live their lives better. Roosevelt becomes known as the trust-busting president. We'll get to that in just a second. Roosevelt also first person to influence the media. The media was becoming pretty big at this time around the turn of the century, and that phrase turn of the century means at the beginning of the 1900s. Radio was coming out. It wasn't in everybody's home, but it was starting to come around. But newspapers was the big media of the day, and Roosevelt influenced them heavily. Some would say current administration of the last 10, 12 years have done the same thing. Back to the trust-busting president, these two political cartoons we will look at in class and analyze in class together. Both exhibit Roosevelt's characteristics of his no-fear policy toward big companies. Trust-busting is where Roosevelt would go in, and not he himself, but he would have his attorney general and the people working for the attorney general go in and bust up these trusts. 44 lawsuits were taken to the Supreme Court, and 44 changes took place. All the cases that were taken to the Supreme Court were voted in favor of Roosevelt and the trust breaking up. A trust, if you remember from our Settling the West unit, is a way to buy up. It's an organization or a company that buys up stocks of other companies, essentially buying them out and making your company bigger. And it does create a monopoly. Now, even though he had 44 different lawsuits voted for in his favor to break up trusts, Roosevelt still believed that some trusts were good for the public interest. He says not all trusts are bad. This is a contrast to a president that comes on later, Wilson, who believes that all trusts are bad. But Roosevelt says, yeah, some trusts are good, some trusts are bad. Those are good are those that help the public interest. Next, we have a few examples of how Roosevelt got involved and how he took the government and got involved in business and everyday lives of people. We'll first start with arbitration. The term arbitration means to be a go-between, be a mediator, be someone in the middle to help two arguing groups work out their problems. In this case, the one he's most known for, other than the Russo-Japanese War, which he was an arbitrator there too, but in the coal strike of 1902, we have the workers versus the mine owners. They can't settle their disputes. The workers obviously want three things: better hours, better pay, and safer conditions. The mine work owners, they want one thing: they want the workers to work and then get over everything else. Strike goes on for a long period of time, and because the strike was affecting all the United States' main source of fuel at the time was still coal, steam-powered ships, and the like. Roosevelt steps in, and basically he says the strike will be settled now, or the United States takes over the mine. And a couple weeks later, the strike was over. I mean, that's how Roosevelt approached things. Roosevelt had no constitutional precedence to take over a mine. The government does not have the right to do that, but Roosevelt threatened to do that. And because of Roosevelt's character, people listened to him. People believed he would do what he did. Railroads have been mentioned before, many times before in class this semester. The Interstate Commerce Act is an act that we looked at during our study of the railroads. And basically, the Interstate Commerce Act gave the power to the federal government to regulate railroads or businesses that operate in several different states. If the railroad or company operated in a single state, then it was the state's job to regulate that. But since it operates in several different states, the federal government has that power. No one really wanted to put any teeth behind this, though, because railroads gave a lot of money to presidential campaign funds. It helped him get elected. When Roosevelt was elected, following his term for filling in for McKinley, Roosevelt made it very clear he did not want re-election. And as soon as he said that, there was no money that could be held over top of him to influence him or essentially bribe him like it's used today. So Roosevelt put teeth behind the Interstate Commerce Act, and he enforced the railroad rates. Health and environment, I've already mentioned the Meat Inspection Act. This is a direct result of the book, The Jungle, and the findings from that book, The Jungle. Health inspectors are placed in every major stockyards, meat packing industry, mainly in Chicago, just to make sure that the meat is clean and healthy and proper for human consumption. Pure Food and Drug Act follows that, and this makes sure that your food, but also drugs, your medicines, over-the-counter medicines, have proper labels on them. We were getting labels for generic medicines that weren't the right medicine. You know, you might be getting a bottle of Tylenol and ended up with a bottle of morphine. Now that's extreme, but that's the idea. There was no regulation of the labeling of medicines, or maybe the strength was a little bit off. So Pure Food and Drug Act regulates that and monitors that. National Park Service, Roosevelt was a huge outdoorsman, so this makes sense that he was wanted to create a National Park Service, just setting aside millions of acres of natural lands for preservation, just so people can go and enjoy what the frontier used to look like. And then finally, in civil rights, Roosevelt did not do a lot with civil rights. He did not see a color barrier, though. In the South, there was a situation, I don't know if it's mentioned here, but in the South, there was a situation in a post office where the current postmaster was not doing his job. Well, he replaced that postmaster with a new one, and the new postmaster was a female, and she was black. And there was a huge uproar in the South, obviously, for those actions. But Roosevelt didn't care. He put the person in charge in that position who was the best qualified person. There were some other issues in dealing with civil rights and race relations. He would often meet with Booker T. Washington to deal with the black community and how the United States can help the black community. As a result of that, Booker T. Washington was seen as an Uncle Tom, someone who was willing to accept the position in society that white people had placed them just to get along. A lot of African American leaders like W.E.B. Du Bois did not like that. He says we need to be very proactive and not take what the white community gives us. But regardless, Roosevelt did not treat any one group differently in the United States simply because of color. So again, Section 3 is just all about how Roosevelt takes the presidency and makes it what's known as a bully pulpit. He takes power, by the reins and moves it forward. And essentially, that's what progressivism is. All right, guys, fill out that podcast form. I'll see you in class.